pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you for bringing us all safely here. We thank you for our community and the blessings of our nation. We pray that you guide us and be with us this evening as we consider the people's business. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item of business on tonight's agenda is the approval of the agenda, including possible agenda additions. If I can have the floor computer, please. The first item for consideration on the agenda is a resolution amending the county's classification and compensation plan related to the public safety. This is for the consent agenda. And that's the only additional item that we have on the agenda this evening for consideration.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
There's no discussion. We can vote.
Seven yes.
The next item on the agenda is award presentations and special recognitions. If I can have the floor computer again, please. This evening we have a commendation for the Reverend Dr. Pastor Douglas Kitteridge. And Mr. Ross, if you'd like to read that commendation, please.
Yes, thank you. It's a privilege and honor to read this. This is recognizing Pastor Douglas Warren Kittredge upon his retirement. Whereas Pastor Kittredge was called as the first pastor of New Life in Christ Church in 1975, as a group of Christians from different denominations joined together to express their love of Jesus Christ in the establishment of a church. And whereas in 1985, Pastor Kittredge led the church in the purchase of land for a new building in Spotsylvania County, the church began a capital campaign that raised more than $400,000, and the generosity of congregants and the community members facilitated the completion of the building in 1998. And whereas in 2012, Pastor Kittredge led the congregation in a significant building expansion, adding a $1.2 million expansion to the church facilities, and whereas Pastor Doug Kittredge actively assisted in the establishment of other local churches, including Evident Grace Fellowship, Spotsylvania, New Life Korean Church, Spotsylvania, Hope of Christ, Stafford, and New Life Community Church, Stafford, and whereas Pastor Kittredge contributed to the establishment of Bethany Christian Services, Fredericksburg Christian Schools, Christ Covenant Homeschool Co-op, and a radio station in Spotsylvania and the surrounding region. And whereas Pastor Kittredge provided spiritual leadership, joyful worship, and generous outreach to many within the region, especially during a time of significant regional growth. And whereas Pastor Kittredge was an original supporter of the Central Virginia Justice Initiative and its fight against human trafficking in the region, and whereas in 2019, Reverend Dr. Pastor Kittredge ended a successful 44 years of ministry as senior pastor at New Life in Christ Church in Spotsylvania County, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors, this 29th day of October 2019, publicly recognizes Pastor Kittredge and extends on behalf of its members and the residents of Spotsylvania appreciation for his service to the community and congratulations upon his retirement. Motion to approve?
That'll be added to the consent agenda, Mr. Ross. Which brings us to the next agenda item. If I can have the floor computer again, please. The consent agenda this evening is to approve the minutes from the October 8th, 2019 Board of Supervisors meeting. Item 2 is to approve the issuance of housing revenue bonds for Palmer's Creek. This is the EDA and Board of Supervisors bond program application for bonds up to $22 million. Number 3 is to appoint Al Durante to the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. This term expires 10/29/21. This is in the Lee Hill District. Item 4 is to appoint Al Durante to the Transportation Committee. The term expires 10/29/20. This is the Lee Hill District. Item 5 is to appoint Bonnie Jewell as an alternate on the Rappahannock Juvenile Detention Commission. That term expires 6/25/23. Item 6 is to approve the contract renewal with Advanced Media Solutions of Virginia LLC for broadcasting of the county's cable channel in the amount of $97,335. This is a 5-year contract with optional 1-year renewals. Item 7 is to approve the purchase order to Securus Technologies for annual maintenance of the XGen software in the amount of $113,415. Item 8 is to approve the revenue bonds for the Heights at Jackson Village and the Heights at Jackson Village 2 up to $80 million. This, again, are EDA and Board of Supervisors revenue bonds. Number 9 is to authorize the public hearing to repeal obsolete code. This is for the Transportation Safety Committee, which is now the Transportation Committee. Number 10 is to reappoint Gregory Bell to the Citizen Budget Review Committee, which is the CBRC, as an alternate. That term expires 12/31/21. That's the Lee Hill District. Item 11 to reappoint Karen Adams to the Citizens Budget Review Committee as a primary member. That term expires 12/31/21 in the Lee Hill District. Item 12 is the recommended appointment of Lynn Smith to the Board of Zoning Appeals. This term expires 10/29/24 in the Battlefield District. And then item 13 is a resolution amending the county's classification and compensation plan related to public safety, which is the additional item that was added. And item 14 is the commendation for the Reverend Dr. Pastor Douglas Kitteridge. And that is your consent agenda.
Is there anyone who wishes to pull any items? Mr. Yakubowski?
Number 8, please.
Any others? Mr. Ross?
To pull 3 and 4.
3, 4, and 8. We can open the public comment on the consent agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on any items on the consent agenda only?
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to address a consent agenda item? Seeing none, we'll proceed to the remaining consent agenda except for 3, 4, and 8. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
No discussion, we can vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Number 8 was called first, if we want to go.
Oh, okay. No, I just would like to pull and vote on that separately. I didn't support the project, and I don't support the bonds for it.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
could you refresh us on that project?
Anyone from staff who's would like to remind us?
I have Debbie Sanders here, and I also have the attorney Mike Goff for the bond counsel for the EDA.
Yes, if it's the board's pleasure, I do have Michael Graff here with McGuire Woods, who would be able to brief you on the project.
Gentleman Mike Graff, representing the EDA. We also have a representative from the developer here, Stacy Kaplowitz. These are the revenue bond programs. We talked about them last year in the context of the Palmer's Creek apartments, and this is affordable senior apartments that the developer plans to develop and would like the EDA's assistance, and the EDA has indicated that they're willing to assist them in accessing lower interest tax exempt bonds and housing tax credits at no cost to the EDA or the county.
Are there any questions or discussion? Mr. Skinner?
Obviously, there's 2 of them here. The EDA is receiving money for this. Isn't that true?
Yeah, the EDA will receive a fee at the closing.
Fee at the closing
Yep.
of any time we actually were the means of getting the bonds through. and it's no expense to the county. There's no responsibility to the county, no matter what happens. And so between these two projects, I know one of them brings in 120,000 for one, and I believe the other one's a little higher.
Yeah, I mean, it's-
22 million.
Yes, sir, Mr. Skinner. It's based on the size of the financing. So we're currently projected to have the first phase of Jackson Village and the Palmer's Creek financings close this calendar year. So the size may vary a little bit, but it would be probably in the $300,000 range total of unrestricted fees to the EDA that they can then use in furtherance
Just
of
wanted
their.
to make sure of that.
Thank you, sir.
One last question. Are these all age restricted?
Stacy, could you talk a little bit about the age restriction? I know they're all affordable.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The 100% of the units will be age restricted, and 100% of the units will also be affordable for residents earning, seniors age 55 and up, earning up to 60% of the area median income.
Any further discussion from the board? If not, we have a motion to approve from Mr. Skinner.
Not yet, no.
We can vote if. Okay.
6 yes, with Mr. Yakubowski voting no.
And Mr. Ross?
So for 3 and 4, I want to just say that Al Durante and I are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but this gentleman is one of the few people that I can actually have a civil and civic conversation with. In November of 2015 is when I first met him, and on that day he really gained my trust and confidence for what he did on Election Day in the Cortland District. So Gary, I think you've got a great pick. And I think it's great to have diverse representation on our committees, and I'm going to make a motion to approve him for both 3 and 4, but I just wanted to give him the respect that's due to him from me for being able to have civic conversations, and we can agree to disagree at the end of the day, but we can still be friends. So thanks, Gary. Motion to approve both 3 and 4.
You can hit it now.
It didn't work.
Thank you, Dave.
7 yes, motions pass.
Mr. Chair, the next item of business on the agenda is the public presentations. Amy, has anybody signed up to speak?
Yes, sir. I will read the guidelines for public presentations. Public presentations are an opportunity for you to present matters you believe deserve the board's attention. These presentations are not part of a public hearing. Sign up to speak at each public hearing is separate. Public presentations are one-way comments from you to the Board of Supervisors. They are not a forum for dialogue or debate. To make a public presentation, please sign up on the provided sign-up sheet and print clearly. Come to the lectern when your name is called. Clearly state your name and voting district for the record. Address your comments directly to the board. State whether you are speaking on your own behalf, which you will receive 3 minutes to speak, or state the group name if you are representing a group, and you will receive 5 minutes to speak. Public presentations shall not be used to address matters subject to public hearings or to make political campaign speeches, private advertisements, or personal attacks. Written comments are always welcome. The first speaker is Robert Morrison, followed by Justin Langridge.
Good evening. My name's Robert Morrison, Livingston District. I'm incumbent before the board for 4 or 5 years, I believe, to address the same subject, first responder compensation. The board's always supported the initiative, but little action was taken. Tonight, I want to thank you for finally doing the right thing and voting for the proposed salary and compensation package. Rumors are reported the impact has been very positive. Let's continue to make Spotsylvania the best place for first responders. Thank you very much.
Justin Langridge.
Good evening, members of the board. Justin Langers will be speaking as a group. 5 minutes, please. I'm a member of the Spotsylvania Career Firefighters Association, IAFF Local 3886. I reside in the Lee Hill District. Tonight beside me is our local president, Chris McIntosh. Chris lives in the Battlefield District and has allowed me to speak on behalf of our organization tonight. We'd like to thank each of you for your unanimous vote that was made by the board on the 8th of this month to implement a proposed public safety pay plan, option 1, in full. We had 6 pending resignations at the time, 4 of which have since rescinded their letters, and 2 more who have requested rehire, and numerous inquiries of interest. Without the implementation of this plan, the county would have likely been faced with having to close or eliminate staffing at slower fire and EMS stations. And I can only suspect that the sheriff would have had to have made difficult SRO staffing decisions in order to maintain an adequate number of patrol deputies. As you all know, this has not been a short road getting here. Most of you have graciously given us your time and attention and have worked with us to understand the problems while helping us find ways to move forward. Unfortunately, like most things at home, work, and life, we've been challenged constantly by competing priorities along the way. At one point, 2 or 3 budgets back, it was asked by a member of this board, if you can only have one, would it be new positions or pay? Knowing the changes that the county was facing and knowing that we would need these positions to maintain appropriate and adequate levels of service to the citizens, I said we need the people. Mr. Skinner, I'm not sure that I wouldn't have said pay instead of people now. We came very close to finding that breaking point, didn't we? As far as the plan that was developed and presented to you, literally after years of ongoing dialogue and development with county staff and you, the board, we finally have what I feel is a fair, competitive, and fiscally responsible pay plan for public safety employees. A recurring and often discussed theme was the need to stop competing internally and a need to stop trying to match jobs within the county, and rather a growing and continued need to compete externally with the job market. This plan compares to other public safety compensation models around us, specifically those that you've been losing employees to. And it should be noted too, though, that it doesn't fully mirror them. One particular contrast you may note is salary top-out for some of the higher-ranking positions. This puts more funding into the lower-ranked positions where we see more turnover, while still allowing for career growth and financial motivation for your employees to develop and move into positions with greater workloads and greater responsibilities. It should also be noted that these are still not Fairfax, Prince William, or even Stafford salaries, but they are fair and competitive. It attracts firefighters to work here, it gives them a reason to stay here, and motivation to promote here. And, oh yeah, it finally eliminates the issue of compression. You may have heard a thing or two about that. You all have a tough and endless task of almost constantly prioritizing how to responsibly spend our tax dollars. I only know or fully understand the situation that we see here in fire rescue and some of public safety. But I've heard there may be some other county departments or divisions that may need to make changes similar to what you've done here. If that is so, I hope these folks bring their needs to you. I hope that you'll give them the same time and attention that you've given us. Equally, I hope that they'll give you the same education, patience, and understanding that we've tried to give you all as the board along the way. When everyone works together, great things can happen, and Spotsylvania can remain a great place to live. Thank you again for your vote of support on the 8th, for all the time you've given us along this long road that we've taken working together to get here. I'd also like to thank County Administrator Ed Petrovich, Deputy County Administrator Mark Cole, Finance Director Mary Sorrell for leading the finance team along this way, Bonnie Jewell for her support, Lori Newman from Human Resources, the sheriff, his team, and everybody else that's helped get us here. Also, I have a few seconds I'd like to share with you. I don't know if anybody remembers back to the final budget public hearing, but you all heard from one of our members, Frankie Webster. And Frankie talked about the need to be able to support his family. He enjoyed working here in Spotsylvania County, but he was looking to have to move elsewhere. He wasn't all talk. He went out. He sought employment elsewhere. He was offered a position with Prince William County, and he accepted. And the plan that you all have put in place has caused him to rescind that resignation and stay here in Spotsylvania County with us. And he's a great asset, and I thank you again.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to address the board at this time? Yes, ma'am.
Apologize for my late arrival. I'm Jane Stratton, Livingston District. I recently moved back into Spotsylvania County. Having learned of the agenda only on Saturday and a couple of hours available, I have tried to educate myself on the needs of our frontline staff by talking to first responders in the counties mentioned in your analysis. These are items I ask for your consideration. Our frontline staff need to be compensated fairly. That is a given. However, having been in management for more than 14 years, I question whether salary is the only contributing factor to turnover and lower morale. Let's address salary first. The STEP program is needed. However, I learned that in at least one other neighboring county, they give a one-on-one credit for years of service within or transferring into their jurisdiction rather than just 50%. Something to reconsider if you want to recruit seasoned veterans relocating to or considering our county. You cite extensive overtime. Are we understaffed? And if so, what are we doing about it? Is it countywide or only in certain localities? Have you considered flexibility within the fire department? One county relocated staff from 2 fire stations within close proximity to a station with routine overtime. That occasionally required overtime in those 2 stations, but did not become routine, and it filled a gap in another station. One police force stated that overtime became opportunities, not mandatory, unless it was a safety issue. If overtime is mandatory, perhaps we aren't charging the vendors enough for specific events. The example given was to increase the rate from $40 an hour to $55, $50 for the officer and $5 for the car. The increased pay gives an incentive to those who want additional income. I was told that $40 an hour may not be enough to get an officer to want to suit up and leave the family, but $50 may. Benefits that you might want to consider. As mentioned before, one-on-one credit for previous service in an outside agency. Uniforms and equipment. All required uniforms and equipment furnished by the agency. Pay for cleaning of the uniforms, appreciated and not a big expense. Contract with a cleaner within the county to give back and help with tax revenue. Full pay and meal allowances while attending the basic law enforcement academy. Stipends for career development such as underwater certification, bike patrol, ALS providers, pump drivers, hazard materials, technical rescue. Officers can earn up to a certain percentage in gradual step increases over a designated number of years, meeting certain qualifications at each level. Credits of $1,200 to $1,500 per semester with passing grades. And other counties pay more for associates, bachelors, and masters than stated in your proposal. A wellness program where first responders are allowed 1 hour a day to work out while on duty. Retreats for patrol supervisors and other leadership. Recruitment. Are we painting a realistic picture for applicants who may come in with a TV image of the job? I was told that officers who are a minority will get hit from both sides. Coverage in media is only negative. Nationally, we have millions of interactions with the public each day. We hear only about the negative. Applicants get to ride along with officers.
Ma'am, your time is up.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who did not sign up who wishes to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll close public presentations.
Mr. Chair, the next item on the agenda is board reports.
Mr. Benton?
No report.
Mr. Marshall?
I got a report. Sorry. Just one quick thing. I know I mentioned it at our last board meeting, but I'd like to see if we can get our zoning department to make some recommendations for changes to our sign ordinance. The current ordinance was allowing these advertisement signs on the weekends to be in our median strips and on the side of the road and different things. It's hard for us to enforce. We don't have the staff out there on the weekends to take them down where they've been put in the wrong places. If we could, I'd like to see a change that we consider, have the board consider issuing a permit for these companies so we can hold them accountable per individual company that's putting these advertisement signs out there. Right now, they're everywhere. They're putting them in churchyards, they're putting them anywhere they can stick one. So I don't want to stop a business from advertising, but what we have going on right now is a little out of hand. Thank you.
Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one, I had the privilege of reading a declaration last week at the old courthouse. It was making October the month for domestic violence, to be aware of all the domestic violence that's going on, not only in Spotsylvania, but throughout the United States. And I will tell you that what I learned, and they actually had a young lady that would, that as a child, just along with what her father would do, it had really, really affected her life. And we do have a lot of domestic violence here in Spotsylvania. And I just ask that everybody who may see something, if yelling, making sure that women do not get hit. I mean, take the time to read about domestic violence. It's amazing that over 1,000 children a year have to put up with domestic violence, and it does affect you as you grow up. So I know that Empower House put this together, and Empower House does a great job along with the Sheriff's Department, who also has a program for domestic violence. And I want to thank the Sheriff and his people for doing what you do for domestic violence, and thank Empower House too, because they never stop. It's a 24-hour day for them, 7 days a week. So once again, I want to thank Kathy and also Chris Rooney, who helps raise money for these causes and everything. So I know that Mr. Rooney is in the hospital, and I wish him a quick recovery, and so he can get back on the job, getting that money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Yakubowski?
No report.
Mr. McLaughlin?
No report.
Mr. Ross?
Okay, I just have a question. So when is VDOT going to be here? I thought they were going to be here tonight. Is it the second
First meeting in
Tuesday?
November.
Okay.
And then every month thereafter.
Okay. So they weren't supposed to be here tonight?
No, sir.
Okay.
First meeting in November.
And then every first meeting after that?
Every first meeting thereafter.
Okay. And I've sent a couple things forward about some issues I've seen on Route 3.
Yes, sir. The staff has sent to the board a form to be filled out, if you will.
Okay.
So that we can track those issues and get them to VDOT in a timely manner.
Thank you. And the other thing I have is GWRC on last Monday. I would like to make Ed an alternate without exception. We already have a couple alternates, but I know he's an alternate on FAMPO, and I'd just like to make a motion that we also make the county administrator, Ed Petrovich, an alternate on GWRC.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
We looked at the bylaws for GWRC. They only allow 2 alternates.
Okay.
So
Then
there's no
disregard.
room for me.
Okay. Sorry. I know that. I know that's
although,
disappointing.
Although I will be happy to attend if anybody wants me to attend.
I know that's
I will
disappointing
not
for
be
you.
able to vote.
Okay. Well, disregard. Thank you, Ed.
And I have no report.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple items, if I may, even though there's no county administrator report on the agenda this evening. Just some brief status reports on CIP projects that the board has asked for. Animal shelter expansion and renovation. The utility infrastructure work is still underway. Work should begin on the exterior walls in the next couple of months. The Judicial Center expansion and renovation, the contractor continues to make only marginal progress on the facility mechanical yard. We continue to monitor the situation to verify the contractor continues to provide requested information, including their subcontractor shop drawings and updated schedules, but they are behind schedule. Company 6, the conceptual phase is complete. Staff anticipates a statement of probable cost from the architect engineer by Thanksgiving. Company 3, staff has determined that Company 3 could be relocated to an undeveloped portion of the Arrett Park facility, which is county-owned property. A design meeting is planned with FREM later this week to finalize the conceptual layout. Procurement is drafting an RFP for design services for Company 3 and Company 12, with the intent to replicate the design between sites as much as practical. Hunting Run Phase 2, there's rock issues on the site, but they've been mitigated. Site work continues, and the dock work subcontractor will mobilize in the next few weeks. Berkeley and Todd's Tavern Community Centers, we're still working with VDH on the identified well sites. And finally, S-Power has acknowledged receipt of the waterline draft cost share agreement and is reviewing the document. With S-Power also, the early footing and foundation permit for the substation was approved today. This will allow S-Power to start construction on the substation. The substation site plan is nearing approval, and staff issued comments on the Phase 1 site plan, which contains 165 megawatts of panels on October 28th. And the early clearing and grading work is continuing on site. And then just a couple of quick items. I've had the Utilities Department would like to pass along that a customer's child flushed an engagement ring down the toilet at their home. She called a plumber. They were unable to find the ring on Sunday. On Monday, the customer contacted our office to see if we could help. We sent a sewer crew consisting of Patrick Stombach, William Donovan, and Stephen Trigg, and they were able to locate the ring in a downstream manhole and return the ring to the customer. And then one other item on the compost facility, we got a letter. I just want to recognize a couple of employees. There was a citizen that went to the compost facility who takes care of his wife 24 hours a day. He drove 35 miles on a rainy, chilly day to the facility. David Blizzard, the manager out there, Daniel Sweetman, and Edward Bourne at the compost facility helped him inflate a flat tire that he had that he tried to get fixed at a nearby gas station and was able to get him back on his way. So I thank those employees for going above and beyond.
I'm told the staff found a diamond in the rough. Mr. Skinner, did you have a question?
I do. Ed, on the minimal progress over there on the courthouses, is there anything we're doing, or is this strictly behind because of the builder itself?
This is behind because of the contractor. So we are monitoring the situation, and we're working to keep the contractor on schedule as best we can, and we're working with procurement, and we'll eventually be working with the county attorney's office to see what remedies we have.
Thank you. And the last one was, have you had any inquiries from certain people on the animal shelter putting up the...
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Benton?
I just, on the S-Power, can you get with them? I know today they held a job fair and they had over 200 people, but I don't have much information on who attended and where they were from. But I think they're supposed to have a couple more. Could you get with them and see if they could notify you when they're having these, and so we could actually advertise it through our
Absolutely.
website and stuff like that?
Yes, sir.
Hopefully to get a more...
Yeah, they were actually very, very pleased with the turnout. They had over 200 people show up for their first job fair.
Good. I hope a lot from Spotsy.
I will coordinate with them in the future to make sure that we get it advertised as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that brings us to public hearings. The first public hearing this evening is a public hearing to approve the rollback tax code revisions. And we have Debbie Sanders from Economic Development, as well as our Commissioner of Revenue, Debbie Williams. We have the floor computer, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The public hearing for comment this evening is a request to modify the county's rollback code Chapter 21, Taxation, Sections 21 through 101 through 102, and 21-106 through 21-111. For use, value, assessment, and taxation for agricultural, horticultural, forest, or open space real estate. The request consists of the following. To delay the imposition of rollback tax after a property has qualified for use, value, assessment, and taxation is rezoned to certain specified uses, but before the change in use. Align classification of real estate to qualify for use value. To amend the referenced ordinances to track more closely with the language of the enabling statutes. The background is follows. The county currently allows certain qualifying land to be assessed at a use value for agricultural, horticultural, forest, or open space real estate uses authorized by Virginia Code 58.1, Chapter 32. The statute requires, and the county's ordinance currently reflects, that when land is taken out of the program, a rollback tax equal to the sum of the deferred tax for each of the 5 most recent complete tax years, including simple interest on rollback tax, is imposed. The purpose for the amendments lies in the Virginia Code, authorizes the county to adopt an ordinance permitting the delay of the imposition of the rollback tax if the tax would be applicable solely because the owner or his agent requests the property be rezoned to a more intensive use than the qualifying use, and the new use to which the owner or his agent requests a change is a use specified in the ordinance. The proposed amendments, first, Section 21-106, change in use, zoning, or area rollback taxes. The suggested ordinance change allows the county to delay the imposition of the rollback tax when the rollback tax would be due solely because the owner or his agent requested that the property be rezoned. Secondly, Section 21-107, eligibility of certain properties after change in zoning. Rollback taxes shall not become due for any parcel of real property solely because of a change in the zoning of the real estate to allow for specific uses. Uses are defined in the county's zoning ordinance that includes industrial 1 and 2, commercial 1, 2, and 3. The additional proposed amendments, Sections 21-101, 102, 108 through 111. The suggested ordinance changes more closely mirrors the language in the authorizing Virginia Code statutes. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. When you said the applicant or the applicant's agent, would that also be if the county was the applicant? Would the county also fall into the provision to allow it to be extended? No, I'm saying if the county was the applicant. We've done it before to move stuff into commercial, get it moving along faster. Okay, so there would be no rollback tax that would, okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Marshall?
I think we may have a misunderstanding with your question. Your question is if the county was the applicant acting as the agent, correct?
Well, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the county acts as the agent, there would still be rollback taxes due to the county from the owner of the property.
Or for the property to go like into their name or something, there's no rollback tax involved.
No, it wouldn't be in the county, it wouldn't be in the name, the county's name. It would still be, the owner would still be liable for rollback tax. The county wouldn't be the owner, they'd be the applicant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, at no point that the county owns it. It's just, I mean, it was done in South Point 1, where the county was the applicant to move it along for potential commercial uses. And so I just want to make sure that if that is done too, that the county is able to hold on, to put in the same program.
Right, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well,
So I
you know,
misunderstood you.
No, no problem.
if the county initiates, because the county can do a rezoning that the property owner has not requested,
Correct.
all right, would there be any rollback taxes in that case?
No, sir, because the county initiated it on the county's behalf.
All right.
That's where I was going with it, so, yes.
Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Skinner?
So if it's approved today, this would not affect anything that S-Power would be under the old, what they submitted?
Yes, if it's not adopted until today, because there's nothing in
Right.
reference here to make it retroactive or
Right,
anything.
okay.
Yes.
All right, that's, gotcha.
Are there any other comments or questions from the board? If not, we can open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to address this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Mr. Skinner. Is there any discussion? If not, we can vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
The next public hearing is a grant application for the VCR Trail Extension to the Harrison Road and Salem Church Levels Road intersection. This is in the Cortland District, and I believe we have Mr. Dan Cole, the transportation engineer for the county, here to present. We have the floor. Computer, please. Thank you.
Good evening. This is a grant application for VCR Trail extension to the Harrison Road, Salem Church intersection. The Planning Department is making a request to the board to approve a grant application under the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program. The grant is for a multi-use trail that would extend from the existing Virginia Central Railroad to the intersection of Harrison Road and Salem Church. This is the trail would extend from this location where it's circled here and connect to a future trail along Harrison Road. Recommendation and support. The Transportation Committee voted to approve this concept for the trail at their June 6th meeting. The project is consistent with and supports the Spotsylvania Trailways Master Plan. And it's shown here. It's kind of an overview, but the plan basically is in this location. The key findings, the trail extension would be constructed all on county-owned right-of-way. VDOT has a companion project at the intersection of Harrison Road and Salem Church Levels Road, which would upgrade the traffic signal to include pedestrian activation and marked crosswalks. And the trail extension will connect bicyclists and pedestrians with a safe access to commercial property to the east and south. The financial impacts, the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program requires Spotsylvania County to approve 20% of the cost, to fund 20% of the cost. The county's share of the project would be approximately $62,650,000. Approximately half of that cost would come from an existing trail proffer. Other information, funding for the project is for the FY 2022 time period. And if the grant is approved by the board, the county would have 4 years to complete the project. And that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Yakubowski?
Just a quick question, Mr. Cole. On the first slide that you had with the yellow and the red. Yeah,
Yes.
Second one then. Is there going to be a path right along Salem Church Road?
No, it's actually going to go from the existing trailhead where there's the handicap parking.
Right.
And then go down to the intersection. So
Oh, okay.
it won't be right along the roadway.
So that yellow line that's along Salem Church Road is?
Yeah, it's not completely accurate, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, just checking. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? If not, we can open the public hearing. Is anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to address this issue at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Mr. Ross. Is there any discussion? If not, we could vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Thank you, Dan. The
Thank
next
you.
item on the agenda is a code amendment, 19-0001, Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors. This is amendments to Chapter 23 of the county code for community center and place of worship. And we have Wanda Parrish, our planning director, here to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The public hearing that's before you this evening is an amendment to the zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the item earlier in October. They recommend approval with a 6-0 vote, and staff does also recommend approval of the ordinance. The amendment includes changes that are recommended to ensure compliance with provisions of the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, or RLUIPA. And what it does is it provides for consistent treatment of community centers, the use community centers and the use place of worship, that they are either always both special uses or they're both permitted uses depending on the zoning district. So this amendment does affect a number of zoning districts, including agricultural 2, 3, residential 1, 2, 3, 12, resort residential, rural, and mixed use 1 and 2. And in all of those cases, the community center is provided to be a special use in the amendment so that it can be consistent with the place of worship designation. And then finally, in commercial 1, the proposal is to remove place of worship as a special use and instead make it a permitted use to be consistent with the community center use designation. The amendments also define community center. And what this does is includes a clarification to state that a clubhouse owned by a condominium or a property owners association and a hotel that has meeting facilities, those types of uses are not considered a community center. And really the root of that is that community centers have very different impacts than these types of uses. Homeowners association clubhouse, that's an insular type of gathering place that's for the residents of a particular community. It has different transportation impacts. And similar for a hotel, they tend to be insular. The hotel, the attendees of a conference might be staying at the hotel, so the impacts are quite different. So we wanted to differentiate that those items do not fall under the definition of community center. So with that, staff is recommending approval.
Any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, we can open the public hearing. Is there anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who wishes to address this issue at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Mr. Marshall. Is there discussion? If not, we can vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next item on the agenda is presentation and reports by others. And our first presentation this evening is smart scale categories. I have Mr. Dan Cole back up. This came out of the FAMPO meeting a couple of weeks ago. FAMPO is looking for localities' guidance on whether or not to change categories from Category A to Category B in applying for the next round of smart scale. So with that, I'll let Dan take it from there.
There are 6 categories that Smart Scale is ranked in, or scored in: safety, congestion, accessibility, economic development, land use, and environmental quality. And,
Dan, is your microphone on? And if you're using that one, yeah, can you pull it closer to you?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. And there are 4 categories where a city and county can be evaluated in. The scoring emphasis varies depending upon which category the city or county is in. Spotsylvania County is in Category A currently, along with Nova and Hampton Roads as a large urban area. But we could just as well be in Category B with the smaller jurisdictions like Richmond or Roanoke. FAMPA believes the region should consider a change to Category B. This is a map of the state showing the various government agencies and the categories they are in. The emphasis for Category A jurisdictions is congestion mitigation, which makes up 45% of the criteria. Whereas if you look at Category B, it's more evenly spaced out among the six ranking elements. Congestion mitigation points are assigned by person throughput and personal hours of delay. This is a disadvantage to the county because we don't have the population and traffic volumes or the financial resources that compare with Nova and Hampton Roads. 2 areas that may benefit us if we change Category B would place greater emphasis on safety and economic development. In summary, the University of Mary Washington found, along with FAMPO, that we would actually have scored better in Category B in rounds 1 and 2. So next steps, I guess, is to gauge your interest in switching to a different category, Category B, and to ask if there's any additional information the committee would like to see to make the decision, to make this decision.
Sure.
Mr. Ross?
So at the last FAMPO meeting, they did ask us to report. I don't know if we need to vote on it. We can, but we should. It was something that the members from Spotsylvania County didn't want to weigh in on without bringing it back to this board before we did as a decision, and they were going to go back to Stafford County as well, and the city as well, back to their boards. But I think it's a good idea. We haven't, even though we do have some wins here, it wasn't necessarily through Smart Scale. We have had some wins, but I think the leadership on the staff side believes that we can actually do better as a B than an A when we're competing with the other A's. So I recommend we do move to B.
Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with Mr. Ross. If it takes a motion, I will say, make a motion to try to get us in the B category. But the other thing is, when would this take effect? As far as if we go from A to B?
And it's for the next round of Smart Scale.
Right, and
So
that's,
they had the first round.
that's,
Are we talking,
well, we have our first meeting in November the 4th, but that's to discuss changes to round 4, so maybe.
So, Mr. Chair, I still think it has to be approved by the state to move us into that category.
Sure.
So this is
but
just our request
the
to the
request,
state to be
but-
moved into category B, and they have to
and
approve it.
I appreciate the reps coming back to this board.
Yes, it'll have to go back to the CTV.
And so, you know, we're competing with Nova and Hampton Roads. We lose quite a little bit there, to be honest with you. So I make that motion, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yeah, I support it, but I just wanted to, is there any, for the members of the FAMPO and, is there any negatives? And do we miss out on any grants moving, or anybody knows? And anybody can answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, you know, we may have to be a little more creative when it comes to some of those other categories. That would be the only, if that's a downside, I don't know that it is, but.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a downside for me. Just on there, it puts more of the, as you're proposing the plans, it puts more weight on economic development, which for me, I've always thought transportation should be transportation and not focused on economic development. But if it helps us get transportation projects and more funding to the area, I'm supporting it.
Thank you.
May not be relevant to making the change, but how do they differentiate between economic development and congestion mitigation? It seems to me that's one of the reasons for congestion mitigation.
Yeah.
I think it's how you sell the package. Right?
Is there any further discussion? If not, there's a motion from Mr. Skinner.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next item on the agenda is the budget adjustment and appropriation presentation for public safety compensation. This is for the adjustment for option 1. And we have Mary and Bonnie from our finance staff here.
Floor computer, please. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have a couple handfuls of slides here tonight to walk through a little bit of historical information to how we got here, some information about what it is that the plan will address, and then information about the details of the plan and the funding of the plan. I'm going to move through the slides pretty quickly, but I, as always, am open to questions. So if there's a question, please stop me and let us know. Firstly, we want to talk about some historical information. Back in October of 2018, there was a presentation to the Public Safety Committee by the Sheriff and the Fire Department to present a compensation plan concept. And then in January of 2019, that public safety compensation plan was actually presented to the board. And at that point, after Finance's review, it was estimated to cost about $3.1 million. In April of 2019, the board directed the fire department and the sheriff to work with county admin, finance, and HR to review that proposed plan, to confirm the cost and determine if it could be implemented in January of 2020. And that working group began meeting in May. And then in May of 2019, the board actually approved allocation of 2 sources of funding, the S-Power rollback taxes, and then any additional funds remaining at the end of fiscal year 19 for this plan. Then July of 2019, the sheriff actually reported that they were beginning to see an uptick in their turnover that they believe was related specifically to the Stafford's pay study. Stafford has not actually approved or implemented their pay study, but they did in July provide at least 5% salary increases across the board for their employees, and they actually, I believe, gave their some of their public safety employees additional, again, to address their turnover. It's our understanding Stafford is still working on that plan, and they will be bringing back a plan that they will propose and adopt in July of 2020 for fiscal year 21. So after reviewing those pay scales from Albemarle, Prince William, Fairfax, and Stafford, Fire and Sheriff developed an alternate public safety compensation plan, and that's the one that we're talking about tonight. That plan actually places employees on the scale, giving them 1-for-1 credit per year of service with Spotsylvania, and then up to 50% credit for any prior work in another locality. And that is estimated at $6.4 million annually. So what we're trying to resolve here is turnover. Turnover has been higher than target. You will always have turnover in departments. You will always have turnover in fire and sheriff. The goal for fire is at or less 10%. The goal for sheriff is at or less 8%. And you can see on this chart here that from 17, 18, and 19, all but 1 year, both fire and sheriff have exceeded their turnover goals. The data from HR for those 3 years shows us that the majority of that turnover is occurring among those employees with between 3 and 10 years of service, and it is most prevalent in what we're calling frontline positions, your firefighter medics and your deputies. And so with turnover, you have overtime. These are 24/7 operations. They need staff to perform. So when they don't have staff in place, someone else has to fill in. And so especially for FREM, we've seen an increase that has exceeded their budget. In 19, if you'll recall, you actually adopted a budget adjustment of $1.4 million to increase their overtime in 19, and they're on track to need another $1.5 million in fiscal year 20 because of the overtime related to turnover. Recruitment and retention is another big issue. We have to be able to recruit, and we have to be able to retain these employees. And the data shows that the majority, as I said, of the public safety turnover has occurred among those 3 and 10 years of service. The sheriff and the FREM reported some examples of why retention is so important. Obviously, the training has been an issue we've talked about. On a sheriff's side, it takes 12 to 18 months to train an employee before they can actually be on the street and be released to duty. It's at least, or around 6 months of training on the fire side. Experienced deputies can handle calls in half the time. On the FREM side, experienced staff have heightened skill levels that help in a variety of technical areas. And they also can perform the advanced life ALS providers. Experienced deputies know the geography of the county on the sheriff's side, and on the FREM side, same type of thing. They're familiar with the community. They have an increased knowledge of target hazards in the county. And then on the sheriff's side, experienced deputies fill the needs of all their specialty teams, and on the FREM side, they can operate a variety of apparatus, and they can serve as instructors. Compression, and you've heard it mentioned tonight, and you've heard it before, compression across and within positions is an issue that has occurred countywide. The evergreen option that the board implemented provided only credit for years of service in your current position. And then before this current fiscal year we're in, it was fiscal year 2008, the last time that the board actually gave a COLA, cost of living increase, and a merit, both of those at the same year. COLAs have been given for some years, merits on others. The COLAs increase the scale. Merits move people up the scale. So if you don't do both of them, then compression is an issue. We did do both in fiscal year 20, but what we had proposed was a 2.4% COLA, and actually you all split it into a 1.2% COLA and a 1.2% merit. So both occurred, but not the full percentage of the COLA. And so again, what happens here is when the scale moves up, but employees with tenure don't get credit for their service, then it creates compression issues between new and tenured employees. So along with this information, which we knew to be true, and we'd worked with HR to get the facts on, county admin actually surveyed both FREM and sheriffs to find out what other issues were contributing to turnover. The first slide I'm going to show you is, and this is generalized and summarized because there were lots of different comments. I tried to get them onto one slide, but these are the respondents on the FREM side of the things that were concerning to staff. I cannot guarantee you, and no one can, that this pay study is going to have a direct impact, but I've tried to say for those that I think there will be a potential direct impact, you'll see a yes in the right column. Things like no realistic career ladder, lack of recognition, morale, salary should compensate for certifications. All of those things are specifically addressed, so I am assuming that they will have a direct impact. The other concerns at the bottom of the slide, training classes being paid out of pocket. I'm just grabbing some education leave granted to some and not others. The fact that some do not want to be ALS certified. those are things that will not necessarily be impacted by the study, but I cannot guarantee you that. On the sheriff's side, we have the same type of information. Again, the top 4 issues, I believe, will potentially have a direct impact with the study. Due to staffing shortages, the training can't be attended, lack of recognition, again, salary and pay for experience is insufficient, and the need to address additional opportunities for advancement. But things like staffing levels being deficient for the county's population, we would have to add additional staff to make that happen. So this study will not necessarily address that. So now we want to talk about the details of the actual study, what's happening. The way the employees are placed on this scale. The scale is, as was mentioned earlier, the scale is similar to Prince William, Stafford, but it's not identical, and it is not identical on the top end. It is, so that now that the scale is in place, they have to decide how to put people on the scale. And this plan calls for public safety employees to receive 1-for-1 credit for the years of service in the county, and then up to 50% credit for any applicable service in another locality. So I'm going to give you an example here. In this example, we have a lieutenant who has 12 years of experience in Spotsylvania, 3 years as a lieutenant, 9 as a firefighter, and then they had 2 years in another locality. So for that first 2 years, they'll get 50% of that credit, the bottom row, they'll get 1 year of credit for that. Then they will have served 9 years in a grade 7 as a firefighter medic, they'll get 9 years of credit for that. And then they'll serve 3 years as a lieutenant in a grade 14, that's another 3 years. You add those together, they will be placed on the lieutenant scale with 13 years of experience. And along with that, they will also receive stipends for certain things. And these are annual stipends that are given in flat amounts. They do not increase with COLAs, they're just flat amounts that they continue to have throughout their career. So if they attain a degree, an associate's degree will be an additional $500 a year, a bachelor's $1,000, a master's $1,500. If they attain advanced life support certification, they would receive $5,000 for the intermediate level, $7,000 for the paramedic level. And then if they are advanced life support field training officer certified, they'd have another $2,000 a year. And if they have the ability to fluently speak another language, they'd have another $1,000 a year. So once all those things are factored in, the employees are placed on the scale. The next couple slides are grouped together by positions. In this particular slide, we're looking at the FREM positions. There are 453 positions in total that are impacted on this particular pay study. And on this slide, you'll see there are 227 FREM, and 168 of them, or the bulk of them, are on this slide for firefighter. They're firefighters and firefighter medics. What each of these slides, and I'm not going to read every one of these, but I want to walk you through what's on the slides. You'll see the current position, the title. You'll see the number of employees that exist in the second column here. You'll see what the current average pay for all those people that exist in that pay, and then what the new average pay will be after the compensation study. And then the 2 columns to the right will show you the range of increases. At a minimum, for instance, in that recruit firefighter of those 25 employees, someone is getting $5,703, someone is getting $12,703 a year. And the other 23 are getting either something in between or one of those 2. Those are the ranges. And we have listed that for every single one of these positions. The next slide is the balance of the 59 firefighter positions. These are your lieutenants, captains, battalion chiefs, division chiefs, and deputies. And again, you see the information across, including the range of increases from minimum to max. On the sheriff position, all the sheriff positions are on this slide. There are 195 of those. 137 are those deputies on those first 2 columns. And again, we've laid across here the positions, the averages before and after, and the minimum and maximum salaries on each of these. And then lastly, we have the 911, the communications group. This is the smallest group. There are 31 employees here. 24 of them obviously are your operators and your officers. And again, we show their average current salary, their average pay after the comp study, and what the minimum and maximum increases will be per year for each person in that position. The cost, as I noted earlier, of this full implementation is $6.4 million, or equates to 4.3 pennies on the real estate tax rate. If we were to implement this in January of 2020, which is what is being considered, the funding for it is estimated to cost $3.2 million. That would be effective January 13th. That's the first full paycheck in January. And so the effect will take The pay increase will take effect on January 13th. The first paycheck that the employees would see, the increase would be January 31st. And as we pointed out repeatedly, inherent to this is into a step scale proposal is that steps are awarded every year from now on. So the step scales that are presented here, the grades are approximately, I think in most cases, 5% between each grade. And then the steps have varying degrees of percentages, starting with a higher degree in the first and then leveling off to a lower percentage in the final year. So it's front-loaded is what we're calling for the percentages. So inherent, like I said, you would have to have a step increase each year. You would also be considering a COLA. When you consider a COLA for other county employees, you would also have a COLA for this group, and those scales would increase with that COLA. The cost of that subsequent year step, and we're assuming a 2% COLA for now. We have no idea what the COLA will be for sure next year. But assuming a 2% COLA, we're estimating the cost to be another $1.5 million or 1 penny on the tax rate, and that will be effective July 1, 2020. Fiscal year 21, we have put these people on scale with their service through July 1, 19. So in July 1, 2020, they will get another step and whatever COLA is implemented there. In order to fund this, we'll need to add $3.2 million in the current fiscal year 20 budget. You had assigned or set aside $500,000 of the S-Power rollback. We also have $3 million available in the fund balance, but we do have to address that $1.5 million fire rescue overtime issue. So we'll have to pull that money out, and instead, we're proposing that you reduce the transfer to the capital projects fund for the out years by 1.2 to make up the $3.2 million necessary. Now, that is not the ongoing transfer. That's the additional one-time transfer that you have approved beyond that. And the reallocation of that will not negatively impact any immediate projects, but it will require an additional $1.2 million that be transferred in the out years to make that up, okay? January 2020 implementation will increase the fiscal year 21 budget by the $6.4 million, because we'll have the full year next year, which is approximately 4.3 pennies, plus an additional 1.5 for the steps and COLAs, which is another penny on the tax rate. And additional funding will be required to address any non-sworn public safety employees, general government, and school employees. That is it. I hope I didn't go too fast. I tried to get through them, but if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Skinner?
Mary, if you go back to, I'm not sure what slide, annual stipends, you would please. Okay, so the top one's fine, the events, I understand what they get. Attainment of a degree, the annual, is that good as long as once they get that degree, they're adding $500 to their salary?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And is that the same way through that? Intermediate is $5,000? Who is paying for it? The question I have is, one of the things we found that was the firemen, people had to pay for their own training. So now, is that to replace what it costs for training?
No, it's my understanding that many of these, including these degrees, that the county is reimbursing for some of these costs. I don't know that it's all, but someone from the fire department may want to address
Sure.
What's happening on the certification. I believe some of this training is actually happening through and paid for by the county.
Okay.
So yes, sir. We are providing the funding to support for ALS training. For example, that is a requirement within 4 years of their employment. So this is to adjust between a firefighter and a firefighter medic. So this is the ongoing skills that they will provide, being able to recertify those skills and being able to continue. We are paying for that. That is not training that has been required for anybody to pay for out of pocket previously.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. That's it.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for letting our citizens know exactly what their tax dollars are going for. As I had said before, this is long overdue. I think that our public safety portion of the county does an excellent job, and I think that they should be compensated for that. And I do believe that this puts us on that path. My concerns that I've raised before, and I'll continue to raise, is doing this outside of the budget process. I don't want this to bump anything that is going through the budget process off. And then that item that is being bumped, get the blame for a tax increase. Because I'll tell you right now, taxes will go up next year. There's literally no way you can do this and pay for example, the third year of the school evergreen study and the rest of the county employees who also deserve not only COLA increases, but they should be put back on step increases too. Next year, as we saw, it's going to be 5.3 pennies on the tax rate, which is necessary, which should be done. But I want everybody to understand and know going into this that this is what is going to be required to continue this. We didn't get here overnight. This was not something that just happened and we had no idea how it got here. You cannot hire folks and then not increase their pay as other jurisdictions are increasing their pay and expect those people to stay here. So eventually, you have to pay. And that is what we're seeing, that the cost is 5.3 pennies on the tax rate, $6.4 million initial payment, another 1.5 to continue this going. Because if we don't continue this program and moving along with steps, you will then see ourselves in the next few years having the exact same problem. And I think that we owe it to our taxpayers to have, number one, a very vibrant, well-staffed, well-trained public safety department that stays here. And that's what we have been seeing, these numbers of 14%, 17%. These are people that are coming to Spotsy, training here, and then moving on for better pay. And I think that it's about time that we stop that trend as much as we possibly can. But I think people need to understand that there is a cost to it, and a cost that I willingly and gladly support. But I think that the public out there needs to understand that that is what this program is putting forward. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Marshall?
Just a question with Chief Irby, since he's here representing Chief Callahan tonight. With the anticipation of this pay plan, we should see a huge reduction in the number of employees leaving the department, correct?
Yes, sir. That is the intent, and obviously with the initial vote from the previous meeting and some of the comments that you've heard earlier, we've already had people retract their 2 weeks' notice, as well as others requesting to come back.
Right. And as we see that, do you anticipate seeing a reduction? We should have a reduction in the recruit schools. We've been having one after the other, it seems like, throughout the last 3-4 years. So do you anticipate seeing any savings there with your training budget?
I do. I think that as we've seen when our numbers were still traditionally trending with our attrition rate, and with the vote that you took previously, that has already gotten our numbers back to even, where we were already starting to trend away. So with that, where we would normally be planning another academy right after this one was to graduate, we're now looking like we will have more time before we need to plan to do that. So the hope is retaining of those employees, getting to the single-digit attrition numbers will keep our folks, slow down those recruit academies.
Yeah, because I know the recruit academies are not cheap, so I
Yes, sir.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank
If you stay there.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This for both departments, both sheriff's office and fire. And that is, okay, one of the issues we had is really overtime. I mean, that's been a big thing of everybody's budget is the overtime. What's the, how much are we going to save in overtime? I know there'll still be overtime. I mean, we can't help that sometimes. But if you could give me your view as what's going to happen in overtime in the fire, and then possibly Major Wells could come up and give us or the sheriff, either one.
Yes, sir, Mr. Skinner. So our hope is that once we can get this recruit school out and we get our folks into the field, we are certainly going to see a reduction. So a lot of our overtime now is used to cover those vacant spots. So we do have a +1 number in each station each day to cover normal leave that the folks have. So whether that can be vacation, sick, comp time, or family medical leave. So with that, those folks are built into that. So when we have vacancies, we no longer have that staff to cover it. So we're using overtime to cover minimal staff positions. So once we are able to get this recruit school out, which takes us 6 months, and we get more to an even number, those positions will be filled daily, and additionally allow us to allow for training and some additional things. So to put an exact number on the overtime reduction, I can say that once it's out, the folks are in the field, it is definitely going to reduce that number significantly, but it would be very hard to project that number, of course.
Can you project how far or how long, a year, 2 years, before you probably get to that position? Or do you see it sooner?
Yes, sir. So this recruit school graduates after the first of the year. So once we're fully staffed at that point, I definitely think that we will see a reduction there, and especially if we're not running a recruit school. Because when we run a recruit school, a lot of those instructors that are coming in for that are off duty being paid overtime to be able to teach, as there's not necessarily a regional approach, it's a local approach to that training. So I would say after the first year leading into the new budget year, we should see a significant reduction.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, gentlemen of the board, I'll have Major Wells give you some exact figures here because you know he's down to the penny. But I think now we have about 10 employees now that are currently in field training, so that takes about 400 hours by the time they get through their field training. We have another academy starting in July that we have 6, I'm sorry, did I say July? Sorry, Mr. Ross. Meant January. We hope to get that number up to 10. Of course, it'll be several months before they're out from the academy and through their field training, as we've discussed many times. But the amount of overtime that we save once we get up to where I think the staffing needs to be, I think will be tremendous. And Major Wells will give you some figure quotes.
First of all, thank you very much for your support. The overtime, let me back up. We've had 4 people withdraw their resignations in the last 2 weeks, so that's a very big plus. Our overtime budget, and I think finance could probably put the pennies on it, but our overtime budget ends up being around $950,000 at the year end. Of that $950,000, about $450,000 is reimbursed overtime. And so our overtime is really out of pocket between $450,000 and $500,000. Most of that is for after hours that things run over. It's for court because the deputies go to court on their day offs. So our overtime is a little different than FRIM, and our overtime, when you only have a $450,000 to $500,000 overtime, you can't reduce it but so much. We have managed our overtime, I think, very well over the past years, and we'll continue to do so. But again, we don't have the $1 million overtime. We only have out of pocket between $450,000 and $500,000. It can be reduced a little bit, but again, with that amount, it can't be reduced but so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other comments from the board? McLaughlin?
I'm just going to motion to approve.
Yeah, Bonnie handed out the budget adjustment and the appropriation resolutions for option 1, so that would be the motion, Mr. McLaughlin.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Do we need to read this, Carl, or just?
Do you need to read it?
Can we just say?
No, I mean, it's
Motion to approve.
before the board, it's on the agenda. You can certainly just move to approve it.
Motion to approve.
If you all would like to read it into the record, you can, but again, it's before the board properly.
Motion to approve.
If there's no discussion, we can vote.
Seven yes, motion passes.
Thank you, ladies. Mr. Chair, that takes us to closed meeting. Carl?
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is your resolution to adjourn into closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, employees, or appointees or employees of any public body, specifically employees of the Department of Fire, Rescue, and Emergency Management. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn a closed meeting for discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business's or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, specifically a recreational and entertainment business, healthcare industry, and government industry. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn in a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigation posture of the public body, and for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically a land use matter and a matter relating to human resources, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, 5, 7, and 8, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
If there's no discussion, we can vote.
7 yes, motion passes.
In accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene in a closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Mr. Chair, the last item on the agenda this evening is new business. The next Board of Supervisors meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 14th, 2019 at 4:30 p.m.
Is there a motion to adjourn? We can vote.
7 yes.